The sun had already dipped below the horizon, staining the sky with smoky purples and charcoal grays as Funmi stepped out of the small grocery shop she worked at. The store sign flickered with tired neon light behind her. It had been another long day stacking shelves, answering rude customers, and pretending not to notice the store manager's wandering eyes. Her backpack hung heavy on one shoulder, filled with nothing but a water bottle, a book she'd been trying to finish for months, and a leftover bread roll she was too exhausted to eat. She rubbed her forehead and turned into the narrow alley shortcut that cut her commute by 15 minutes. The alley was dark, almost unnaturally so. The kind of dark that clung to the skin, soaking into her pores like molasses. She usually walked briskly, kept her head down, ignored the graffiti-covered walls and the soft rustle of trash that sometimes turned out to be rats. But tonight, the air was still, too still, and her senses prickled with that cold, invisible hand of danger. Then she heard it again. That voice. That faint, choked sob. Funmi froze. She had heard it 2 nights ago, too. Back then, she told herself it was the wind, or maybe a stray cat stuck somewhere. But now it was unmistakably human. It wasn't loud. Just a single, broken sob, so soft it sounded like a breath. But it didn't come from a person on the street. It came from the forbidden warehouse that had been condemned for years. She crouched behind an old oil drum, watching the warehouse door, rusty, half-broken, but chained shut. Or so she thought. A black van with tinted windows rolled to a stop, its headlights off. 3 men stepped out, dressed in black, with caps pulled low over their faces. She held her breath as they unlocked the side entrance of the warehouse. One of them laughed, a low, guttural sound. Another flicked a cigarette and stepped in. Then she heard it again.
Crying.
But this time pleading. Her knees weakened. "I said shut up," one man barked, and a sharp slap echoed through the still night. Funmi's heart dropped. She clutched her bag tighter and ducked farther behind the drum. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, her fingers trembling. She wanted to walk away. She should. This wasn't her business. She was a nobody in this foreign land, barely surviving with her measly salary, living in a rundown flat with broken plumbing and flickering lights. She already had one bad experience with the police, and that was more than enough. But that voice, that childlike voice, hurt and scared, clung to her conscience like claws. For the next few nights, Funmi didn't go straight home. Instead, she began a quiet mission. She watched from rooftops, alleys, bus stops. She documented when the men left and when they returned. They seemed to follow a pattern. Around midnight, 2 of them always left for at least 40 minutes, probably a food or smoke break. She noticed their laziness in locking the second door, how one thug always forgot to check the side latch. She made notes in her phone, erased them later, and memorized everything. On the 7th night, she saw something that made her cry in the cold. A girl, no older than 10, with tear-streaked cheeks, messy hair, and a bruised arm, was being dragged by her wrist. The child didn't speak Korean fluently, but she begged for her father. Over and over. That's when Funmi caught the name. Appa, Johnman. Appa Iadizio. Johnman? She whispered it again and again as she lay awake at night. She'd heard that name before. He was the CEO of one of Korea's largest tech conglomerates. A widower.
Rich.
Powerful. A man whose life was plastered on tabloids after the mysterious death of his wife 2 years ago. Why would anyone kidnap his child? It didn't matter. Funmi only knew she had to save the girl. That night, at exactly 12:11 a.m., Funmi struck. Wearing black jeans, gloves, and a tight hoodie, she slipped through the fence behind the warehouse. Her heart slammed against her ribs like a war drum. She had memorized everything. The footstep rhythms, the light patterns, the moment the security camera blinked off. She snuck in. The air inside smelled of old sweat, mold, and gasoline. She crept past stacked crates and broken furniture until she found her, huddled in a corner, arms wrapped around her knees, whispering, "Iama, Appa." Funmi knelt beside her.
Sure.
"I'm here to help." The girl screamed. Funmi slapped a hand over her mouth. "Sho, it's okay. I won't hurt you. Please, I'm a friend. I promise." The girl sobbed, but nodded slowly. Funmi carried her out, light as a feather, warm like a broken bird. She ran for blocks, panting, crying, laughing, hiding behind bins and dumpsters until they reached her building. Safe. Or so she thought. The girl wouldn't eat for 2 days. She screamed in her sleep. Funmi woke up at night to find her curled under the bed or vomiting after nightmares. Men knocked on the door some nights, pretending to be from utilities or delivery companies. Funmi would mute the child's cries and crank up the television volume. "I'm coming," she'd shout with a fake smile. "Sorry, you must have the wrong place." And they'd leave.
Barely.
Her friend, Subin, a radio presenter with a loyal listener base, finally helped. "You're risking your life," Subin whispered. "But you're also saving one." Funmi coaxed the girl slowly, using candy and cartoons. Finally, the girl pointed to a newspaper photo of Johnmin. Appa. That was all Subin needed. She arranged a live radio moment where Funmi shared a vague story of a girl who needed her father. No names, just enough clues. The girl's voice was played at the end, whispering his name. By morning, the broadcast went viral. They came in black cars. Johnman arrived with police and bodyguards. The moment his daughter saw him, she ran into his arms, crying. Funmi cried too. But joy turned to terror. She was arrested. "What?" she shouted. "I saved her." "Where's your lawyer?" the officer sneered. "You're a foreigner, undocumented, and you are in possession of a missing child." The girl screamed as they handcuffed Funmi. It took days. The girl cried every night. She refused food, refused sleep, until her father brought her back to the station to see Funmi. The police noticed. The press noticed. And Johnmin, he noticed. Funmi was released, but the damage was done. She returned home, defeated. Until one night a knock came again. It wasn't the thugs. It was him. Johnmin stood at her door, holding his daughter's hand. "She wants to stay with you," he said quietly. "She calls you Iyama." Funmi froze. I can't. I'm not asking.
I'm trying to say thank you.
But I don't know how." Their eyes locked. Something passed between them, and it wasn't gratitude. It had been 3 days since Funmi was released. 3 long, echoing days filled with bitter silence, stinging stares, and the bruises of humiliation that no one else could see. She hadn't left her small apartment except to buy groceries at dawn, and even then, she wore sunglasses and a cap like she was hiding from herself. Everyone had heard the story. Foreigner woman kidnaps CEO's daughter. They didn't care about the truth. They didn't want the truth. Even her landlord, who once bragged that Funmi kept the building from crumbling into hell, now barely nodded when passing her door. Funmi was crouched in her tiny kitchen, stirring watery jollof rice on the gas burner when the knock came. It wasn't loud. It wasn't harsh. It was a soft, deliberate rhythm.
Tap. Tap tap.
She froze, her hand tightening around the spoon. For a moment, she didn't move, didn't breathe. Not again. Please, not again. Then she heard it. A child's voice. "Iyama." She blinked rapidly, turned off the stove, and ran. She flung open the door, heart pounding, and there she was. That same little girl, wrapped in a large navy blue coat, holding a white bunny plush. Her hair was neatly combed now, her cheeks cleaner. But her eyes still held that storm. Behind her stood a tall man in a sleek black suit. Johnmin. Funmi's breath hitched. His face looked like a carved statue, sharp jaw, high cheekbones, cold eyes, but softened only slightly by the girl tugging his hand. "Please," she whispered. "Let me stay."
Just a little while.
Funmi opened the door wider. "Come in." The child immediately curled up on Funmi's worn-out couch like she'd lived there forever. The bunny was placed gently beside her. Johnmin remained by the door, looking like he didn't belong, like he'd stepped into a world made of cardboard and fragile glass. He was too elegant, too clean, too distant. "Thank you," he said finally, voice low. Funmi crossed her arms. Is that why you arrested me? To thank me? He met her gaze. I had to be sure. People lie. I didn't, she snapped. Your daughter didn't. She's all I have left, he said, more to himself than to her. Silence. Then, I'm sorry, he added quietly. For everything. What began as one visit turned into 2, then 3. Then, by the end of the week, Gina, his daughter, was sleeping at Funmi's house almost every night, curled next to her like a baby koala, afraid to let go. She eats with you. She smiles with you, Johnman confessed during one visit. At home, she just stares out the window. Funmi never expected this. Not the guilt on his face. Not the strange warmth that began to grow every time he lingered too long after dropping her off. Why didn't you call the police? He asked one night. She paused, biting her lower lip. Because sometimes police don't save people like me. He looked at her, understanding what she didn't say. It happened on a rainy Thursday night. Gina had a nightmare. Screamed so loudly that the entire neighborhood must have heard. Funmi rushed to her side, whispering, It's okay, I'm here. But it didn't work. She kept screaming, her little fists pounding the bed. Her face turned red from terror. Suddenly, Johnman knelt beside them, wrapped both arms around his daughter and Funmi, pulling them into his chest. She's safe, he whispered. You're safe. Funmi froze. His hand was on her back.
Warm.
Firm. Protective. She didn't pull away. But peace doesn't last long. Not in a world full of eyes and cameras. The media caught on. Photos of Johnman leaving Funmi's neighborhood. Of Gina smiling while holding her hand in a convenience store. Rumors exploded. CEO in secret romance with foreign nanny. Who is the black woman living with the heir's child? Johnman's board members were furious. You're destroying your family name, they warned. You know how this looks. I don't care how it looks, he said coldly. She saved my daughter. It was past midnight when it happened. They were in Funmi's kitchen. Gina had fallen asleep. Funmi was washing dishes, hands in soap, face tired. You should go, she said without turning. I should, he replied. But he didn't. Instead, he stepped closer, closer, and closer until she could feel his breath behind her neck. You always carry the world alone, he murmured. Funmi froze. I don't need your pity, she whispered. I'm not giving it. She turned. Their eyes locked. Then, without warning, his lips were on hers.
Soft.
Hesitant. Searching. She pushed him away at first. But then, she didn't. After that night, nothing was the same. He stayed longer. Touched her more. Soft brushes of fingers. Stolen glances. Awkward silences that were full of longing.
But he was still a CEO.
And she was still her. I don't want to be your scandal, she said one night. You're not. Then what am I? He didn't answer. Just when things began to bloom, darkness returned. Gina's school bag was found slashed. A message written inside. She was meant to disappear. Johnman's security tightened. But Funmi noticed something he didn't. Someone was watching the apartment again. She recognized one of the thugs. The scar on his face. The limp in his leg. They weren't done. And neither was the truth. You don't belong in his world. That was what the grocery store owner had said to Funmi as she packed up her final paycheck in silence. She didn't argue. After the tabloids, the whispers, and the customer complaints, there was no job left to protect. Now she was unemployed. And unofficially mothering a traumatized little girl who clung to her more tightly than she did her own bunny plushie. But that wasn't what haunted Funmi the most. It was the kiss. That stolen, feverish kiss in her kitchen 2 weeks ago. And the fact that Johnman hadn't brought it up since. No apology. No explanation. Just silence. He visited daily, but more distant now. As though he regretted something. Or feared it. Funmi could feel it in the way he stood further from her. The way his fingers would twitch like he wanted to touch her, but didn't. She didn't ask questions. She told herself she didn't care. But she did. Gina had started therapy. At first, it was awkward and filled with stares. But her therapist was kind, and with Funmi at her side, she began to open up, just a little. One sunny afternoon, while Funmi was at the market and her friend Subin watched over her, something horrifying happened. The bunny plushie disappeared. Just gone. From the bed. No windows open. No sign of a break-in. Except a single red string left on the floor. Funmi returned, and Gina sobbed so hard she vomited. She took it. Gina kept whispering. The woman who hit me. Funmi knelt beside her. What woman? The one who called me a mistake. She said she would come back. Funmi froze.
Who the hell was she?
That night, Johnmin arrived late. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked older. Your house is being watched, he said simply. She already knew. I saw someone near the fire escape, she said. Scar on his left cheek. Johnmin nodded slowly. That man used to work for my wife's brother. Funmi blinked. Your wife? She died 2 years ago, but before that she changed. Became violent.
Cold.
After Gina was born, she started drinking. Threatened to take the child away if I divorced her. Funmi swallowed. You think she faked her death? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took Funmi's hand, his palm cold and trembling. I think she's back. And I think she wants revenge. 3 nights later, Funmi woke up choking. Smoke. Black. Heavy.
Thick.
Fire licked up the hallway walls. She screamed for Gina and rushed to the girl's room, found her coughing beneath the bed. She wrapped her arms around her, threw a wet towel over both their heads, and bolted for the door. Neighbors screamed in panic. Someone had poured gasoline on her front door. By the time firefighters arrived, her apartment was in ashes. Everything was gone. Everything. Jamin didn't ask. He simply opened the door to his luxury penthouse suite and held her as she stood in the marble entryway in borrowed slippers and soot-stained clothes. Gina clung to her. Wouldn't let go. Wouldn't even look at her own father. Funmi didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window and watched the city lights blur in the fog of dawn. Then she felt a coat slip over her shoulders. Jamin stood behind her. I'm sorry, he whispered. I should have protected you. She turned. Then why do you keep pushing me away? She asked, tears in her throat. He stared at her. I don't know how to love someone who doesn't owe me anything. Funmi laughed bitterly. And I don't know how to be loved by someone who's afraid of me. They stood in silence. Until he kissed her. And this time, neither of them stopped. It started soft. A kiss at first. Then a touch. A grip.
A gasp.
Hands in her curls. Her palms on his chest. He lifted her, carefully, reverently, and carried her to the bedroom like she was made of fragile porcelain. You saved her, he whispered. But you saved me too. Their bodies intertwined like they'd been waiting years for this. He kissed every scar on her arms. Every mark of poverty and struggle. She ran her fingers down his spine like she was carving him into memory. When they made love, it wasn't about lust.
It was healing.
A tether. Sunlight poured through silk curtains. Jamin was already dressed by the time she woke. He handed her coffee, and their fingers touched again. Too soon, too warm. I have a meeting. I'll be back by evening. She nodded, heart still somewhere in his bed. He turned to leave, then paused, turned back, and kissed her forehead. I don't know what this is, Funmi, he said quietly. But it's the first thing in a long time that feels like home. By noon, news hit. An insider at John Group had been caught laundering money and had connections to a certain missing woman presumed dead. Photos leaked. A blurred image of a woman at the airport, with Gina's plush bunny. Funmi saw it and dropped her phone. The woman wasn't dead, and she was coming back. The first explosion wasn't made of fire. It was made of microphones, cameras, reporters, and anger. John Group was in crisis. The money laundering scandal had gone viral. A top-level executive had confessed, but mentioned a woman. One the world thought had died. Mrs. John is alive. And she wanted her daughter back. Funmi watched it all unfold from the penthouse balcony, her hands clenched around a cold cup of tea. "I can't compete with a ghost," she whispered. "She's not a ghost," Johnmin replied softly. "She's a mistake. But she's your wife."
No. She was.
2 days later, Funmi was invited to a gala. It wasn't an invitation, it was a trap. "I want them to see you," Johnmin said. "You're the woman who saved my daughter. You deserve the respect they refused to give." Funmi hesitated. She had never worn anything more expensive than her $20 church dress. But now, dressed in an off-shoulder silk gown, heels borrowed from Subin, and her hair curled into soft spirals, she looked like royalty. When she walked in, everyone stared. Some gasped. Some scoffed. Some whispered things she didn't need to understand. But Johnmin held her hand the entire time. Until she appeared. She walked in like a windstorm in stilettos. Elegant, icy, manicured to perfection. Moon Hyrin. Beautiful.
Alive.
And absolutely unhinged. She smiled like a snake. "Darling," she said, voice syrupy sweet. "Didn't think I'd let you be happy without me, did you?" Gina was there too, holding Funmi's hand. She flinched at the sight of her biological mother. Funmi stepped in front of her. "She's not yours anymore." The crowd gasped. But Johnmin didn't stop her. Hyrin's mask cracked. "You think you can replace me?" she hissed. "With a maid? A black foreigner? You think I'll let you erase me?" "I didn't erase you," Funmi said, voice like iron. "You did that all by yourself." That night, Gina was kidnapped again. But this time, there was no warehouse. Just an abandoned yacht on the edge of the harbor, prepped to disappear into international waters. Funmi cried until her chest hurt. Johnmin didn't. He moved like a machine. The moment he heard her scream in her dreams, he knew who did it. Funmi insisted on going. "I'm not staying behind again." Johnmin didn't argue. She wore all black again. But this time, not out of fear, but fire. They found the boat minutes before departure. The tide was high. So was the risk. But she climbed aboard first, heart pounding, lips whispering prayers. She found Gina tied to a bedpost, crying quietly. "Yama," the girl whispered. Funmi ran and untied her just as a figure appeared behind her. "Hyrin, you took her from me. You gave her away. I was her mother. You were her nightmare." A fight broke out.
Slaps.
Screams. A broken champagne bottle. But in the end, Funmi stood over her with blood on her cheek and Gina in her arms. Sirens wailed in the distance. Johnmin appeared seconds later. He pulled them both into his arms and never let go. A week later, Funmi was back at her burn apartment. It had been cleaned, rebuilt. An envelope arrived. Inside was a deed. The title to a brand new home. Bought in her name. By Johnmin. She stormed into his office that afternoon. "You can't just buy me a life."
He looked up from his desk.
"I wasn't buying you. I was thanking you." "You think I want your charity?" "No," he said, standing. "I think you want me to stop pretending." She froze. He walked over slowly. Deliberate. Then cupped her face. "I love you, Funmi. Not out of pity. Not out of guilt. But because you gave me my daughter back and in the process gave me myself back." She blinked back tears. "You love me? I want to marry you." Funmi didn't speak. She simply pulled him down and kissed him.
Deeply.
The way he always needed. The way she never thought she'd deserve. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Yes, I'll marry you." 1 year later. The wedding was small. Just close friends, a few reporters, and a laughing Gina who wore a flower crown and kept referring to herself as the flower girl princess of both worlds. Funmi stood in a traditional white gown with African-inspired beadwork across the bodice. Her curls were pinned with silver pins shaped like stars. Johnmin looked at her like she was the only thing holding the world in place. After they kissed, fireworks lit the sky. And for the first time in a long time, Funmi didn't look behind her. She had nothing left in the alley. Only light in front of her. And a whisper in her heart. "You belong now."